Alright, a very warm welcome back everyone. Today I want to talk about cadences and chords. And I'm probably using these terms synonymously, although historically cadences isn't the best term for this. In this case I'm only using it because it is the shorter one in comparison to chord progressions. So chord progressions are basically chords or an arrangement of chords, an ordering of chords that you play after each other in order to present harmonies in your song. And these chord progressions, or the chords in general, are the very essence of music as we know it today. The problem with these chords, especially if we only look at diatonic chords first, is that you do not have that much of an option to choose in all of in your scale which chords you are going to use, and this is why we are going to introduce the concept of tritone substitution later in this video. But let's first take a look at what some of the more prominently used chord progressions are, and the first one you probably came along already if you looked into chord progressions already, is the 2-5-1 progression, which basically tells you choose the second chord of your scale the scale you're in, choose the fifth chord of the scale you're in, so the dominant seventh chord as we talked about earlier, and then choose the tonic chord, so basically the one chord. And if we are again in our C major scale, then the chords we want to play are basically the D minor 7th, then the G dominant 7, and the C major 7th chord. Of course, you can also do this without the 7th extensions, but especially when you look at the dominant 7th chord, the interval or the leading character of this chord is very strong back to the tonic. So I would suggest at least playing the G chord, or the G dominant 7th chord in this case, with the 7th extensions. And this would sound like this. So this would be the D minor 7th, then you have the G7, and then you have C major 7. And in this case, I also want to mention that we are talking about the chords in the root position, so we are not talking about slash chords or anything like that. We'll get to this later on, and this is one of the progressions that you can come up with. Of course, there exist many more others. Maybe if we just try something out, you could come up with something like this. Go from C major 7 to A minor 7, so basically the parallel minor key, then D minor 7, so essentially the 4 of A minor, and then you have the 2-5-1 again. Of course, you can apply the 2-5-1 in the key of A minor as the parallel to C major as well, and this would sound like this. So you have the half diminished B chord here, so 2 half diminished, and then we want to talk about the harmonic minor scale, which means that we are not talking about the E minor 7, but instead the E dominant 7th chord, right? And then back to A minor, or A minor 7 in this case. And this is one of the reasons why the harmonic minor key works so well, because you also have the leading character we talked about earlier in a different video. And this is one of the things that you utilize in these 2-5-1 progressions in the minor key format. So this is the one thing. Of course, you can come up with, we had like the 1-6-2-5-1, then you can probably also do something like this. And you can see that the 2-5-1 can be utilized in many different ways. If we do not want the 2-5-1 to be present, maybe let's try something like this. So C major 7, A minor 7, F major 7, then the G7 as the dominant 7th chord, and then back to C again. And you can see that if you're not utilizing any other techniques, like for example slash chords, you are very limited in the way that you set up these chord progressions, or that you can set up these chord progressions only using diatonic chords. So if I'm going to play any other chord progression now, and the thing is I can put chords together in basically arbitrary order, although this might not sound good. You can see that if I'm just moving out of the key for some chords, we can get some very nice characters in our music. So for example like this. And in this chord progression I used basically two chords, namely this one here, which is the E flat minor 7th chord, and this here, which is the C sharp major 7, C sharp dominant 7 or D flat dominant 7th chord, in order to lead back to the D minor 7 or the C major 7 here. And this is one of the concepts I introduced when we started this video, namely the tritone substitution. And basically the tritone substitution is a way of how you can enhance your chord progressions sounding a bit more lush, other than these 2-5-1 progressions that have been annihilated in the whole music, the whole Western music, and everywhere else for the last couple of years. So let me just break down how you can make your tritone substitution work, and basically what is a tritone substitution first. So if we look at this chord here, which is, as we know, the G dominant 7th chord in the key of C major, and we are going to talk about the key of C major here. We can see that there is this nasty interval that we have been talking about before, so which is basically this interval here, which is the tritone. So we have the tritone from B to F, and if you remember, I told you that this tritone is a symmetric interval. So basically you have exactly 2 tritones in one octave. So if we look at this tritone, the B to F, you also have the tritone from F to B, but in this case pitched down or pitched up, wherever you want to look at it. And the thing is that therefore we must have one chord which uses the same tritone as this G dominant 7 chord with the same character. So again, we have a major chord with a minor 7th extension, which works in the same way the G7 chord works in the key of C major. Okay, so maybe let's break this down a little bit further. You have the G7 chord here. You take this tritone, move this tritone down, and if you notice that this B is the 3rd of the G, and this F is the 7th or the minor 7th of G, right? If I'm now moving the F down, this 7th would be the 3rd of the chord that we are going to look at, or that we want to build basically. And this B will be the 7th of the chord that we are going to build, the minor 7th, so to say, right? So the first question that we have to solve is, which note do I have to play in order for this F here to be a major 3rd above the note that we are searching for? And in this case, if you just count again, you come to the conclusion that you have to play this D flat or C sharp, right? So then we have these 2 notes, and we have the B here. And now the only question remains is, what is basically the 5th of the C sharp or D flat? And this would of course be 3 half steps away from our F, right? And what we come up with is this chord here, and this is a C sharp dominant 7th chord, right? So we have like the major triad, and then we have the minor 7th extension, and this chord works the same way as the G7 chord in the key of C major. So what this means is you can use this C sharp dominant 7th chord in order to substitute it for the G7 chord in this key of C major. And this works for any other key, but then of course the chords are different. So if I'm going to replace this 2-5-1 progression, this one here, I can do so by adding this C sharp dominant 7th chord for the G7 chord, right? So this is the real tritone substitution you are going to look for. So basically the dominant 7th chord which has the same tritone as the dominant 7th chord in the key you are. However, there are some different things that you can do with these tritone substitutions with some sort of finger quotes. Because of course you can also change the character in a way that I've done before. So we had this like E flat minor 7th chord, and this would not be like a real tritone substitution, but some sort of tritone substitution as well. And the reason for that is that basically once you have your root note established, you can use the other chords that you can build from this root note in a similar way. However, you have to be careful which of these chords you're using. In this case, when we were going from the E minor 7, this is just a chromatic movement. So we are going like from E minor 7 to E flat minor 7. Therefore, this works pretty well as a passing chord, so to say. And then we go to D minor 7. And on the other hand, we had the tritone substitution, in this case, with the C sharp dominant 7th chord, I believe. But you can of course also use a C minor 7 if you want to. And the third option, so the first option would be use the real tritone substituted chord, so the dominant 7th chord. Then the second option would be use a minor 7th chord, and then you have the third option, which is use a major 7th chord. So not a dominant 7th, but a major 7th, which would be this one if we're talking about our C major scale again, right? So you could also go from D minor 7 to this C sharp major 7, and then back to C major 7. It always depends on what you're going for in your music. If you want like more large, more jazzy feel, more enriched feel, you can always go for the major 7th chord. If you just want a chromatic movement from a minor 7th chord, for example, you can go, or you probably would go for the minor 7th chord. And in any other case, if you want a real tritone substitution, you can go for the dominant 7th chord in this case. And of course, this works for every other scale that you might want to think of. And in this case, C major is of course the very easy one, so you can easily follow along with this. But it also works in any other key. But of course, you have to be careful with all of these signs.